Hi, this is David Rathoff, and I'm back with another video on my series on making a 2D game with Ruby and Gosu. Um, Gosu is a nice little library for helping out with basically managing access to a game window in the hardware, and it's a pretty small little library, but it just makes it a lot easier to play around with writing some 2D games. Um, I'm also going to be test driving the development of this game as I go through it. So I'll be using RSpec for that. And check out the previous video in the series, which is the part one, um, which covers basically the initial setup of the project and getting testing set up, getting Gosu set up, and and checking in some of the basic changes to a Git repo, which you can find here. I'm at github.com/draffoff slash gosu-tutorial. I'm trying to keep the commit history on this nice and clean too. So if you're interested in looking at the history on this and kind of stepping through the changes that we're making here as we go along, you can go back and take a look at those. Also, I started a thread over here on TIG Source if you're interested. This is if you're not familiar with it, it's the independent game source forums. So anyway, if you want to participate, you can either leave comments here or you can leave them on the videos on my YouTube channel. But definitely looking for feedback. It's still pretty early and I haven't really picked a direction for exactly the kind of 2D game that we're going to be making. So if you have something you want to see in particular, just let me know about that. But for now, we're basically going to be trying to get some of the really basic systems in place. So just to give you an idea of where we left off. So here's my project. And I'm just going to go ahead and run this by running the app file, the app.rb file. And that's going to fire up the Gosu game window here. So basically it's as minimal as it could possibly be right now. All it's doing is loading up a game window that's 640 by 480 with a caption. And then in addition to that, we can do a spec run of our specs here. And we can see we have 2 specs and no failures currently. And so now I'm going to hop over to the editor over here. And since the last video, I made a couple changes. So to kind of bootstrap the game here, I've gone ahead and included all of the classes which are under the lib folder in order to be able to start the game up. And all it's doing is just going through that folder and loading all the classes. So it has all the classes available as the game runs. And then similarly, a theme you'll see as we're doing the testing here is the spec folder is going to contain all of our tests, all of our specs, and it pretty much has a folder structure within it that's going to mirror this lib structure. So here we have a game spec, lib game spec to match up with lib game spec. But the spec runner also similar to what we're doing in the app here, needs to know about where all the source class files exist, and that's taken care of in the spec helper. So I just made a few updates to this. This basically just does the same thing. It pulls in all the class files here from lib. This probably looks a little crazy if you haven't seen these load path things before, and this file globbing here to go get all the RB files. It looks a little crazy to me, even though I've seen it. So anyway, this is all checked in. You shouldn't have to worry about this too much. It's kind of a one-time setup thing. The other nice thing we should get at this point as well is, I'm going to close this real quick. If we open the spec file here, previously I was having trouble with this. I think it was just a naming convention thing, but I should be able to run my specs here if I do Control Alt T. So there we go. it fired up a separate pane over here and basically shows the same output that we had here from the command line. So that'll just make it a little bit easier for us. We can hopefully I don't have to just keep going back to the command line to run the individual specs. So kind of a nice little bonus there. So I think where I want to jump in for now is cleaning up a few things before we try to do anything new. So here is the main game class, and really this is a game window. It's not the game. This is really just inheriting from Gosu window, which is in charge of the main game loop, which basically sets itself up, and then we'll get update, draw, and a couple other methods called on it each time we iterate through the loop. So I think one place I want to start is I'm just going to rename this to be game window for now. We'll have to update this in a few places, so we'll want to rename this file over here, and we'll want to rename this. Basically, your spec names always should mirror the real class names, and then have underscore spec in the name. And anywhere where we were calling like game.new over here, we'll want to call game window.new. We'll want that to be an instance of game window. And I'm just going to go through the rest of these. There shouldn't be too many of them. There's also some ways we can clean up these references, which I'll maybe get into later. Typically, you don't want to keep referencing the same strings like over and over. And then in our app, we will need a new game window, not a new game. And we can just go ahead and see, well, for one, we can see if the app loads up. That's a good sign. So there we go. Gosu window is up here, so just go ahead and close that out. And then again, we can just go back here and run our specs again. So I'm going to do Control-Alt-T. And this is just a plugin in Atom that I'm using. There's an or I think they call them packages, but yeah, it's the RSpec package for Atom that's allowing me to do this. So it's complaining. So what is it complaining about? It seems to think it can't find the specs for this. There are 0 examples and 0 failures. So I'm going to try that again. And yeah, it looks like it just didn't like, I don't know, it's kind of odd. It says it didn't like the name of it. I'm actually going to remove the quotes on this because then that'll just directly refer to that class. And then I'm just going to try running that again. Okay, so yeah, looks like we're back in a good place here. So I'm just going to close these out. And so yeah, there's a few things in here that I'm not crazy about right now. So on this line, on line 5, well, basically this initialize method is setting up the initial game window, and these values here are just kind of magic. I don't know what I'd call magic numbers. We don't really know what they are. We can kind of guess from the context that they're width and height, but that's not really a great way of doing things. So what we could do is we could make that explicit here with defaults. And actually, in the spirit of test driving this, what I might do is hop over here, and within my new, within my game window.new description here, which is basically handling what's going to happen in that initialize block, I can say, I could just say sets a default width, and then we should be able to do something like, have game equals game window dot new. And for a new game window, we should be able to say that the width, so let's do this, expect game dot width dot to equal, and let's just say 640 here. It's kind of arbitrary, but that's what our current defaults are. So let's just try this out and see what we get. Had a typo there. All right, so if we run this, so we have 3 examples and 0 failures. And that makes me wonder if the Gosu window has a width property, because I wasn't actually expecting that to work, because we haven't written our own width method. So one thing we could do is here I'm in the Gosu documentation. So let's just take a look real quick at the window. And my guess is it does have a width property. And it looks like it's also got a height property. So we're getting those for free, so that's the reason that spec is passing. And sorry, wrong project there. So let's just let's say that we, instead of 640 by 40, maybe we want 800 by 600. So let's just try this out real quick. Okay, so here we get a failing spec. It's saying it expected 800, which is what we have here, and instead it got 640. So now let's hop over here, and what I'm going to do here is we could just, if we want this to pass, we could just change this to 800. And that, if we run the spec for that, it's just gonna work. But what I was kind of trying to get at was I want to explicitly set these things up here. So let's just call this width of 800. And if you're not familiar with this syntax, in Ruby you can, so in a lot of languages, if you name your parameters, so we might have width and we might have height. I don't know, maybe we even have depth or something odd. So in Ruby you can actually just set up your defaults up here in the method signature definition. So I'm just going to go ahead and set width to 800 there, and I'll just go ahead and set height as well to maybe 600. Actually, here we can just do it one step at a time here for the sake of getting this test to pass. So now instead of calling super with just a number, I'm going to call it with width, which is a lot easier to understand. If you were to come in here and not know anything about how this works, you would immediately understand what a width is for. So let's do that, and I'm just going to run this again real quick. And now we're getting a bunch of noise here. So what's going on? Unexpected identifier keyword end, and it looks like it's complaining about line 9. Oh, okay. Somehow I typed in a odd character here, so I'm going to remove that. Let's try it again. Okay, there we go. So 3 examples and 3 failures. And I could make this more general, like set default dimensions. Well, let's just do it. So here I'm going to expect height to be 600. If I run this again, now I'm going to get this error here because I'm expecting the height to be 600, but it's hard-coded to 480 at the moment. But before I get that fixed, I want to try to keep my specs so that each one of these blocks here, each one of these it blocks, really is only checking one thing at a time. Um, and the reason I want to do that is, now um, this spec could break for two different reasons. It could break if the width isn't what we expect, or it could break if the height's not what we expect. So instead of lumping them together, I just want to go ahead and make a separate it block here for height. And I'm going to copy this down to here. I'm going to copy the setup for it down to here as well. And then we're going to go ahead and just run this again, and we should just see it fail. Okay. And then if we wanted to just get this passing again, we could come back over here. And I like to keep my lines really short. So instead of stacking all these up horizontally, I'm just going to stack them up vertically. Plus you can kind of format them so that it's a little bit easier to read. So now I'm going to go ahead and name my height parameter as well. And I'm going to save that. And if we hop back over to the spec and run it, we should see it's complaining because I didn't update this. So now that's 600 again. So those two should match. And there we go. So our specs are passing, and we now have these named parameters. So if you were to come in here and you see super with width and height, it's a lot more understandable what's going on here. Earlier I was tempted to actually write basically a width and a height, let's just say a width method, where I would do something in here like set an instance variable for width to be width, and then up here I could just return the value of width. But we already saw that we're getting that for free by inheriting from this, so I'm not gonna do that. But that's kind of the pattern I normally would follow, would be to make instance variables for all the arguments passed in to the constructor here. So now that we have that in place, that's kind of a nice little improvement. So I'm going to hop back over here for a second. Now you'll notice in these expectations, in every one of them we're doing a game window.new, and that might be okay. It might not be an expensive thing to do, but if it was, we could kind of dry this up by doing a before block here. And what this is going to do is, before it runs any of these expectations, we can go ahead and share some state between these things. So I can say my game, and I'm doing this as an instance variable, is a game window.new, and then now that instance variable is going to be available for any of these, and this will get created and destroyed before each of these run. So it's not going to be any more performant, but you'll see it just kind of is going to make this a little bit easier to refactor if we ever need to do it, because all of our setup is in one place for these three. And you can see I'm able to pull out that game window.new line from this. And maybe I should actually just call this game window so it's consistent. I like to be as literal as possible and use very descriptive names for variables. I don't like using things like single letters, or it's a little, if you have an index variable, it's a little bit shorter to type out IDX, which people might understand, but I'd rather just write out the full thing. It's not that much more work. And you'll thank yourself in 6 months when you have to fix a bug and you can't understand, or you wouldn't have been able to understand what all your variables mean. So anyway, I'm just going to run this again, show this is still working. And so now you can see that these are nice and short. And I'm going to leave this one alone because it's I don't really want to cross the describe blocks on this thing too much. So I think we're in a good spot on this. Okay, so I think what I might do here is just a quick check. So I'm looking at what's changed. I'm just going to take all of this and add it and commit it. And I'm going to say rename game to game window and named constructor parameters. And that way, all of that stuff we did, and it's a nice little commit. I probably could have broken up renaming the game to game window into its own commit too, but don't want to spend too much time formatting the commit messages here. I'll just try to remember to keep the commits closer together. And it's always a good habit when you're working on something, just go ahead and push that up. So I'm going to push that, and that's getting pushed to GitHub. So you'll see when I do this that I am pushing from my master branch to my master branch. I won't be doing that for a whole lot longer, just kind of while we get things bootstrapped. I'll work directly out of my master. You can see here that's getting pushed to GitHub. Okay. So yeah, if we load the game up here again, so we basically don't have a game, we have a window. And we can't really do anything with the window. We can't close it using the keyboard. We can't really, there's just nothing going on. It's just a big black box. So that's pretty boring. So let's go ahead and start building in just some of the most basic functionality that we can, which a good starting point for that will probably be just setting up a way to close the window. So let's jump into that. So the way Gosu works is it has a loop that it hits, and it basically consists of update, draw, button down, and button up. And it's going to hit those just over and over and over. I think the default is for it to run 60 cycles in a second. So basically 60 frames per second. So what we want to do is we want to hook into the button down. So as soon as we press the button, we want to just close the game window. And the way we do that is we need to look at, there's some specific values that we want to check against, and based on that we can see if the key that was pressed was I'm just going to use maybe I think escape or whatever I have in this other project. So yeah, here is our Gosu value for escape for the keyboard. So I'm going to hop back over here, and we also need to see, we also need to actually know which button was pressed. So I believe this just takes an ID. I'm not super familiar. I'm actually not going to worry about the button up at this point. So let's just say let's say we want to do game window dot close, which I think is that method. Yes, so it has a close here, and that tells the window to end the current run loop as soon as possible. And then also confirmed here, we have button down takes an ID and button up also takes an ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say basically close the window if the ID that's passed in there is equivalent to the escape key. So I just want to try this out real quick. This isn't obviously I'm not test driving this, but I just want to see if this this works. So I'll just run our app again here, and I'm going to hit escape, and there we go. So undefined method close for game window. Okay, so it didn't like it basically detected the escape and then just blew up. So something about the close it doesn't like. Let's take a look at the documentation one more time here. Looks like it might not be. Let's see. Just take a peek at my other project real quick to see. Okay, game. What is game? Window.close. So that's my window. So I think that's the right thing to do. Because over here, that's basically another game window class. So I'm not sure what it's complaining about. Let me take a look at that one more time. Okay, I have an idea. So I think what is going on here is I'm referring to the actual class here, which is not what I want to do. I want to refer to the instance that we're in. So I could either do self.close or just close. So I'll just do close. And there we go. Now when I hit escape, everything works as expected. Okay, so we basically now in our loop we have this hard-coded thing that says if you hit escape, we're just going to close the game window, and that's not it works. It's not the nicest thing. So what I'd prefer to do is to just describe. Let's describe button down. And what I want to say is it closes the window when the button pressed is escape. Actually, I'm going to call that escape. Doesn't matter. Okay. And the way I want to test that is I'm going to make a new window, and I'm going to expect we call game.button down with that hard-coded value. And I'm actually going to just save that up here too. So escape key. And again, I told you earlier I like really just spelling out things. So for the sake of this, just do this. So when I call button.down with the escape key, I'm expecting, I want to basically expect game to receive the close message is what I want to do. So actually, I think the way I want to write this is I want to say expect game dot to receive close, and I'm actually just going to call game button down the escape key here, and so what I'm hoping is that the game I did it again, game window. I'm going to update. I'll do those later. Okay, so I have a game window here, and when escape is pressed, I'm expecting it's going to receive the message close. So I'm just going to run that real quick. Probably not going to work. No method error to receive. Let's see. Sorry, I got to do a little R-specking here real quick. R-spec searching. I think this syntax is a little different. There we go. Expect the instance dot to have received, and then just give it the message. Also looks like I can do it after. So yeah, let's try that. Okay. So I'm gonna try that again. Saying undefined local variable game. Yep. So I need to rename this one. And let's try that again. There we go. So it's a, let me expand this a little bit. So what it's saying is expect to have received closed, but the object is not a spy or method has not been stubbed. Okay. Okay, so I think what's going on here is we basically have a real instance here, and these kind of two have received expectations or are for mock objects. So we're just kind of having a mismatch here. I'm just trying to think if there's a quick way I can get around this real quick. Yeah, so let's try taking this approach. So what I'm going to say is instead of expecting the individual game window to receive that message, I'm going to say any instance of that should receive yeah, here's what I want. Let's try this out. If this doesn't work, I may just move on for now. So we want to expect any instance of our game window to receive close in this situation. And I'm going to move that up before we actually try to trigger that. So let's just give that a shot and see what happens. Okay, so there we go. So what's happening there is we're hitting this method, and this is considered a message. So in Ruby, you could basically write any method call as a message. So if self is our instance, we could do self even.send close, and that's the equivalent of calling close, because Ruby just treats everything as objects that are receiving messages. So our instance has received close in this case. I'm still not crazy about the way this is set up. I don't like that button down has a bunch of logic in it. If I were just going to do something slightly simpler, I might create a private method down here called close window or something like that, and just basically just grab actually, let's do something a little bit nicer. It's still kind of sloppy. So this is actually working. Maybe we just check this in real quick. So we have a test around this, and we have that going. So I'm just going to do a really small commit. And we can just take a look at the difference there. So yep, just one new method and one new spec, so that's kind of nice. So let's just go ahead and commit that. And since those are both modified, I can use this -a, which is just to add the changes, and -m for the message. Okay, and I'll go ahead and push that up. And the reason I always push is just you never know, you could drop your computer and it breaks, and just having everything up on the server is good. Also, if you're working in a team, it's nice to just kind of be keeping everything up to date as much as you can. Okay, so yeah, basically we have a really crude input handler here, but you'll notice this is a game window class. It shouldn't really be responsible for dealing with all the ins and outs of what you want your inputs to do, because that's just going to get more and more complicated as time goes on. So I think what I want to do is I want to make a spec for like an input manager class. So let's just make a spec for that. I'll just call it input manager. And the default is just you would tack spec on to whatever the class name would be. So now we have this input manager class, and we want to require our spec helper. We can just steal it from over here. And we want to describe input manager. Okay, so the input manager, what we want it to do is we want it to take whatever the ID is from button down and just figure out what to do with it. We don't want the game window to be worrying about that. So let's just go ahead and describe .new for now. And it doesn't really need to be anything fancy, so let's just do the simplest thing we can. So it creates an instance of the input manager. Okay. So then here, all we'd want to do is we would want to say input manager dot new. We would expect that to be an instance of input manager, and this matcher, basically if there's any existing method that's a predicate, so there's basically there's a method somewhere called an instance of question mark, and this is just kind of like a nice little way to make that available and kind of idiomatic here in our spec. So anyway, I'm going to save this and I'm going to run the spec, and it's going to complain. Didn't like, I don't think I like the syntax of something I did. So what is it complaining about? Uninitialized constant input manager. Okay, so that's actually the error that I would expect. So this is another test-driven development thing. We've written a spec that's basically told us, hey dummy, there's no class, go make the class. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to make my input manager. And I probably don't need this required Gosu here anymore on this thing. I'm just going to take that out real quick. Let me run the specs here real quick. All right, well, maybe I do need it. Oh, you know what? That's probably complaining for the same kind of reasons. Anyway, I'll get back to that later. So our input manager. So I just want to make a new class here. So I'm going to call it input manager. And the only thing I really want to do is I just want to set up an initialize method, and it doesn't really have to do anything for now. So I'm just going to save that, and then we're going to run this. And our one kind of silly trivial expectation here works, but it is driving the development. It forces us to make the class. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write another spec that is going to, so basically we want this input manager to take whatever is coming in through the main game loop, figure out what to do with it. And the way that the Gosu loop works is anything that changes the state of things happens in the update method. So I think I'm just going to call this method update. And we're just going to say takes let's limit it to our first case. So let's say it receives the escape input and closes the window. Okay, so here we're going to expect input manager dot new. So I'm going to make an input manager here just to keep this a little simpler. So what do we want to do? So we're going to receive the input. So we may want to do something similar to our previous example over here. So I'm going to start with something like this. I want to expect any instance of input manager to receive close. And I want that to happen when an input manager, let's just do this. So basically what I want to do is I want to say when the input manager is called, update is called with the escape key, that it receives a close method call. So there's our new input manager, and then we'll do something like input manager dot button down, and then I think it's Gosu keyboard escape. I'm actually going to pull this up. So let's run that as a starting point. No method error, undefined method button down. All right, because we don't want button down is a method on the game window. So what I may do actually is I'm going to change this to button down for a second. I'm going to run this again. Okay, so here we go. So no undefined method button down for input manager. So let's just define it. And I'm just going to call it ID to keep it consistent with the Gosu naming. And I'm not actually going to do anything. I just want to see that it's called. So let's run that again. And what is it complaining about now? So it's saying exactly one instance should have received the following messages but didn't. Close. Okay. And that's fine. So button down isn't actually doing anything. So I'm going to make a private, let's try making a private method called close, and it's also not going to do anything. Oops, I ran the class and you run the actual spec. Okay, and then again, isn't doing anything. That's because I need to call close here. Okay, so now now we've shown that when button down for the input manager is called with the escape key, that this calls a method called close, and that method currently doesn't do anything, so it's not super helpful, but it is getting called. And basically what we want to do is wire up the window closing to happen there. So now what I'm going to do here is I want when button down's called, I don't actually want it to do this thing anymore. What I want it to do is I want it to make an instance of for now I want it to make an instance of the input manager and call that instead, and not worry about what the actual implementation is here. And this is kind of an iterative improvement. It's not kind of where we're going to end up, but it's a kind of step along the way. So I'm going to go, before changing the implementation, I want to change the spec. So I'm going to go over to the spec over here, and what do we have here? So we have, it closes a window when the button pressed is escape, and we have a game window, and we set up the escape key. So we no longer actually want to check this implementation here. What we want to do is we want to say we get a new instance of we get an input manager, and that input manager is receiving a button down call with the ID. So I think we can take something like this: expect any instance of input manager to receive button down. And let's just start with that. That's a pretty simple thing. I'm going to hop back over here. So instead of doing this bit, now I'm just going to say input manager dot new, and then we're just going to call button down, and we're going to pass in that ID. And you know what? I probably should have run. Let me run the specs before doing that. So we should see this fail, and that's going to fail because one instance of input manager should have received button down and did not. So now when we hop back over here, we're going to set that up so it will actually receive button down with the ID. And we're going to run the spec again. And what is it not liking now? Okay. Oh, right. Need to actually call. What's happening there is we did all the setup, but we didn't actually execute the code. So, sorry, we had the expectations, but we didn't actually execute the code that triggers everything. So down here we need to call game window with button down and the escape key. Okay, here we go. Undefined local variable escape key, and that's because I commented this. So we'll try that again. Okay, so now our input manager is kind of getting the message, and it's probably not actually doing anything. So one problem we're going to run into with the way this is currently set up is what we're really trying to do is we're trying to call close on game window. But input manager is not going to have any concept of what the game window is. So in order to let it know, we're going to have to do something like pass in self here, which will pass in the current instance of this game window. But instead of just making that change, let's test drive it. So I'm going to hop back over to the input manager spec, and we need to expand the new spec here. So we're going to say it receives a game window. Actually, I'm going to say it. I'm trying to think of how I want to do this. Sorry, real quick. Okay. So we can do something like this. Okay. So I want to say it sets an instance variable for the game window. Okay. And I'm just going to say, for now, I'm just going to say self dot instance variable get on game window to equal game window, and need to actually make that game window. So we're going to make game window is equal to game window.new, nothing fancy. And then we need to also make our instance of the input manager. And we need to pass in this game window. And we want to see that the game window instance variable is equal to the same game window that was created up here. So anyway, let's go ahead and run this. It's going to fail. So the first thing it's saying is wrong number of arguments, 1 for 0. And the reason that's happening is because we're passing in a game window, but there's no arguments for the constructor, the initialize method for input manager. So we're just going to hop back over here, and we are going to pass in a game window. And all we're going to do is we're just going to hold on to that by doing game window is game window. And if we pop back over here, we'll run this again, and this should pass. And it's going to complain again to be an instance of input manager. Okay, so I think what's going on now is we have other places that were calling this with no arguments, and now they're calling now that we need 1. And kind of a common way around that is you can again use this kind of default value up here. So we can just set up defaults for this. So we could just do game window.new if 1's not passed in. It's probably a better way to handle that, but that'll work for now. Sorry, I just lost my input manager. Spec, there it is. Let's try that again. Okay, so now we are back in business. So this can be a little convoluted if you haven't done test-driven development before, and it probably feels a little bit slow, and it's taken some time to kind of explain what's going on here. But basically what we've done is we've pushed the button handling down into this input manager class so that the game window doesn't have to worry about it. And and we've wired things up so that if this receives button down with that ID, or receives button down basically with any ID, it's going to call close. And then close doesn't actually do anything. So let's fix that. Let's make close actually do something. So the way we'll do that is in here we're saying receive the button down, receives the escape input, and closes the window. So we have called it with the escape button. What we want to do, kind of what we're moving towards here, is we want to see game window.close called, because that's what's actually going to close the window. So let's do that first. So let's expect any instance of game window to receive close. Okay, and this is going to fail because it doesn't. Saying it should have received close, but it didn't. So all we need to do to get that to pass is to actually make this thing close. So we're holding on to our instance of game window up there. I like to set these things up as accessors or readers. So we should be able to publicly get a hold of game window since we have to set it in the constructor. And basically that prevents, what I was going to do initially was have to write the instance variable out here and then call close on it. I don't really like to do that. I'd rather set it up as a method call. That way if like we ever need to do something to game window, it's a lot easier to do it when it's when you're referencing a method than referencing an instance variable, because it's methods are about behavior that's easier to change than state. So anyway, so now we can just call game window.close. And if we wanted to, we can even define that as the reader as a private method, but I'm not too worried about it. So I'm just going to leave that alone. Let's try this one more time. Okay, so what is it complaining about? So exactly one instance should have received the following message but didn't. Close. So we're that's line 17. So one thing I'm running into here is I have two, we saw this earlier, but I have two expectations in here, and it's kind of hard for me to tell which thing is failing. So I'm just going to split these up. I'm going to say receives escape input and calls close. and then I'm going to say receives the escape input and calls close on game window, on a game window. So in this one I'm going to get rid of that, and in this one I'm going to get rid of that. And let's see which one's actually failing. Okay, so maybe it was some weird interaction about having both of those in the same spec, but so here we're calling button down and expecting the input manager to receive close, or any instance of it to receive close, and it's doing that. And here we're calling input manager.button down with escape and expecting game window to receive close, and that is passing. So theoretically, if we run this thing and we hit escape, it closes. Cool. And that's kind of the beauty of I know it probably feels like it's taking a long time right now, but it'll get easier as we get on a roll with this stuff and get these things split out a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, the beauty of writing specs and seeing them pass is that usually if you go to run the code, that should all work correctly. So I think I'm going to stop this one here. I've kind of been going for a while. I realize this is might feel like a lot just for getting an escape button going, but I think we're setting up a good pattern here too for being able to handle more sophisticated inputs and have that taken care of in this class instead of in the other class. And as we go along too, since this is kind of the top level where things happen, we'll probably follow a similar pattern where we introduce something, whether it's like playing a sound, displaying the main character, displaying a background, playing a soundtrack, handling game logic and collisions. Like, this is the place where that stuff will initially get introduced, and then we'll want to push those things out into separate classes that are dedicated to handling those things. So this is just kind of like the first example of that pattern, and we should see more of it as we go. So anyway, thanks for joining me. Sorry this one kind of ran long, and I'm hoping in the next once we get through setting up these like basic systems, and we can actually get into doing some fun things. Having something that looks a little bit more like a game setup. But yeah, if you're following along, you can get the latest code here. So I'm at github.com/drathoff/gosu-tutorial. And if you're looking into this on your own, I recommend checking out the Gosu site. It's pretty good. There's a separate site here that has documentation for all the different classes, and honestly there's not a whole lot to Gosu, or at least it's deceptively simple maybe, but there really aren't a whole lot of classes to figure out, but this is where the documentation is for that. Also, if you want to comment on the video, that would be great, either directly on my YouTube channel, or if you want to go over to the TIG Source forums and leave comments there, that'd be super handy. Like I said, I haven't really decided exactly what kind of 2D game I'm going to do at this point. I have some ideas. I have some favorites. I kind of like I like brawlers, like the old like River City Ransom style thing, or even kind of like God Sim type things. Or maybe even a platformer. I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion at this point. So if there's something you really want to see, kind of let me know about that. And feel free to like the video. I'll include all my links in the description of the video, so you can easily find all these resources. And if you know somebody who'd be interested in this, share it with them, or post it on Twitter. And thanks again for watching.